Good afternoon and welcome back to our next session for the Virtual Investor 2024 Pitch Conference. My name is Janine Thomas. I am CEO of JTCIR and I will be the moderator for the event. So for this event, each presenting company will provide a 5 to 7 minute elevator pitch followed by a Q&A. I am very pleased to be joined by Dr. Maria Maccecchini, Founder, President, and Chief Executive Officer of Annovis Bio for our next presentation. Welcome, Maria.
Well, thank you very much, Janine. Thank you for having me.
So happy to have you. Before we get started, I want to inform our audience that Annovis Bio is publicly listed on the New York Stock Exchange and trades under the ticker ANVS. And during today's discussion, the company will be making forward-looking statements, and I encourage everyone to view the company's website at annovisbio.com or the SEC's website for the latest filings and information. So Maria, we're happy to dive in. I'll now turn it to you for your quick pitch.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very happy to tell you that we are working on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. I started the company a long time ago with the hope I would have a drug that treats both diseases. And as of 3 weeks ago, I know that we have data in Alzheimer's, positive data in phase 2/3 Alzheimer's, and in 2 weeks, we will have hopefully positive data in a phase 3 Parkinson's. Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are devastating diseases that affect our loved ones, and they're going to affect us as we age, or at least a lot of us as we age. So as far as I know, buntanetap, our lead asset, is the only drug that I know of that improves cognition in Alzheimer's and motor function in Parkinson's disease. It has a very interesting mechanism of action because it restores the health of the nerve cell. What it actually does, it speeds up the information by which a nerve cell communicates with its environment and with other nerve cells. And by doing that, the nerve cell functions normally. As I was saying, we have phase 2/3 data for Alzheimer's. I'll show that in a little bit. And we are expecting phase 3 data for Parkinson's. Next slide. So I already mentioned they're devastating diseases, but they're also huge unmet needs and huge markets. In the United States alone, there's 7.5 million people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And on top of that, there may be another 1 million that has neurodegenerative diseases of all kinds, be that ALS, be that Huntington's. And these diseases to date have either palliative drugs that help them a little bit or no drugs at all. Our intellectual property estate for the composition of matter goes to 2044, and for the use patents well into the 2040s. To date, we have been very capital efficient. We never really had much money, so we had to make do with what we had. We have spent $90 million from invention to 2 phase 3 studies. Now we'll need a little bit more money to move to the next phase 3 study. Next slide. This is our pipeline. As you can see, Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are well into phase 3. We will have a meeting with the FDA for Alzheimer's in September and for Parkinson's in October and discuss how to further develop the drug. If we don't know Parkinson's yet, but if it works in Parkinson's and since it works in Alzheimer's, we believe that it should work in Lewy body dementia. And then we have another drug for traumatic brain injury that has kind of been sitting, in all honesty, because we haven't had money to develop it. And the third drug is for late-stage Alzheimer's, for advanced Alzheimer's disease. That drug is in phase 1. Next slide. So I'm quickly going to describe to you the 2 phase 3 studies. For Alzheimer's, it was a 3-month, double-blind, placebo-controlled, symptomatic efficacy study in 320 early to moderate Alzheimer patients. Symptomatic means that it works short term. If you do a 3-month study, you really only have 3 months data. In that study, we measured cognition, as ADAS-Cog11, which is the scale that the FDA recommends. In Parkinson's, we did a 6-month double-blind, placebo-controlled symptomatic study. Again, in 450 early to moderate Parkinson's patients, and symptomatic means it works in 6 months. In Parkinson, we used the UPDRS, which is also the recognized scale to measure function. Now, I keep talking about short term. Ideally, of course, you want the drug to work long term. So when we go to the FDA, we will discuss with them how to do a disease-modifying study, which is a long term. What does it do long term? Does it change the course of the disease? We want to do that in Alzheimer's and in Parkinson's, and that will be discussed with the FDA. Last slide. This shows the data we had in our 300 patients in Alzheimer's disease. On the left, you see a subgroup because it turns out it only works in early Alzheimer patients. But in that subgroup, you see highly statistically significant data and a dose response between the high dose of 30 mg and the 7.5 dose and the placebo. So we see that this drug increases cognition in early Alzheimer patients to a very lovely, high statistically significant level. I do need to point out that the 3.3 points we see here in improvement of cognition is better than what has been seen with Aricept. And on the right, we showed same cognition, but in ApoE4 carriers. Why did we single out ApoE4 carriers versus the general early Alzheimer population? Because the newly approved drugs, Leqembi and donanemab, they don't work in ApoE4 carriers. Plus, they're very toxic in ApoE4 carriers. So ApoE4 carriers have no drugs. The toxicity is brain bleeding and brain swelling, and the efficacy is just lower. We don't really know why. Whereas what we see here is that in ApoE4 carriers, it works just as well as in the general early Alzheimer population. The reason it is not statistically significant from placebo is that the number is quite a bit lower. So I'm very happy to tell you that our drug in a phase 2/3 study works in a dose-dependent manner in early Alzheimer patients. I don't have any data yet on the Parkinson's study, but that will come in 2 weeks, and we will report it. That's it. Thank you very much.
Great, quick pitch, Maria. Definitely an exciting story. Congratulations on all of your progress so far. Definitely going to be an exciting time for Annovis in the coming weeks for sure. So we are going to open it up for Q&A. So to our audience, if you have a question, click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type in your question, and we will get to as many as time allows. So we have questions that have come in already, so I'm going to get us started. So our first question, when are you meeting with FDA to discuss this study design, and has that meeting been scheduled?
No, it has not been scheduled. We're still organizing all our data because when you submit to the FDA, you need all your data. You can't just say we have top-line data and so on. So we plan to submit the request after the 4th of July for Alzheimer's and early August for Parkinson's. So we expect the meeting to be September for Alzheimer's and October for Parkinson's. By the way, we do have an FDA meeting on July the 11th. That is for the new composition of matter that we discovered on the old drug, to actually for the bridge studies and to get approval by the FDA to continue with the new drug.
Great. Okay, so our next question. Hi, Maria. How do you think ADAS COG is going to change with more time at 24 weeks, at 72 weeks? And how would it compare to lecanemab and others?
Yes, so that's an excellent question. And of course, I would love to tell you it's going to stay up there. Because, as you know, since you're asking this question, Aricept increases cognition by 2 points, so it's -2. We increase it by 3 to 4 points. Leqembi and donanemab and Aduhelm don't decrease it at all. They just decrease it less. So if we can stay above at 18 months, that would be fantastic. Now, honestly, I don't know. That's why we have to do the study, because Aricept, which is short-term, looks better than Leqembi and Aduhelm and donanemab. Long-term doesn't. Long-term, it goes back down to placebo. And at this point, I wish I could tell you it stays up. I'm not sure.
Our next question, are you planning to add another cognition co-primary endpoint for the phase 3 trial, and what would that be?
Excellent question. The FDA just came out with a new guideline that you don't need the CGIC or the ADL, and we want to make sure that applies to us, because the guidelines say that it applies to early AD, but early AD is a little bit a semantic issue. What is early? I mean, so with a little bit of luck, we don't have to, but we do consider using either the ADL or the CGIC or the sum of boxes for the 18-month study, and then use a lot more patients. So we think our long study will be 600 to 700 patients.
Which indication has the quickest path to approval? Will you conduct both studies or focus on one to conserve resources?
Well, obviously, disease modifying is long. It's 18 months, so it's a long study. Whereas symptomatic is short. If the FDA would allow us to do another 3-month study, we would be done in 9 months. Because the recruiting has been very easy. It's a 1 pill a day. It has no side effects. People like it. They kind of feel good. That's the good thing of our drug. So that would be the simplest. If the FDA tells us we have to do a 6-month study and 3 months isn't enough, it's still the simplest because we'll be done in 6 months. Yes, so it's something we need to really look at, how the market reacts, how we get the money. But yes, symptomatic would be way better. By the way, there is another advantage to symptomatic. Leqembi doesn't improve cognition. Donanemab doesn't improve cognition. These drugs may want to partner with a drug that has no side effect and improves cognition.
Okay, we've got some great questions here. I'm going to keep them coming here. Can you explain what happens between unblinding and having data in reference to the PD data in 2 weeks? Are you saying you haven't seen the data?
No, I can't say that. I have seen some data. So between unblinding and seeing the data or releasing the data, the first thing is unblinding does not come to us. It goes to the statisticians. And they first they have to import all the data because the data is stored in different computers. Then they have to make sure they imported it correctly because sometimes there are mix-ups and whatever. Then they have to make sure that whatever they imported makes sense and so on. That takes about 3 to 4 weeks. I was a little delusional when I thought it was going to happen in 1 week. And then we get piecemeal. We get something that makes no sense. And then you say, for instance, how does ApoE? That's not the first thing they gave us. Nobody was thinking about that. And then you go, well, since Leqembi and Aduhelm have a problem with ApoE4 carriers, and then the New York Times had this great article that ApoE4 carriers actually have a really, really strong tendency and predisposition to get Alzheimer's. So we looked at it. So we don't have all the data. We have some.
Was Butanetap given on top of Aricept? And what is the percentage of patients who receive Butanetap on top of Aricept?
Yes, we just got that actually. We didn't have that. Yes, it's given on top of Namenda and Aricept, and 60% are on Aricept, 40% are on Namenda, and they mostly overlap, but not quite. And then a whole bunch are on bizarre stuff, over the counter.
Okay. Our next question, what are your predictions on FDA reaction if UPRDS Part 2 misses?
I don't think, God, you guys know too much about this. This is a really, really difficult question because we listened to the FDA and we switched to UPDRS2 as primary endpoint. Now, for your information, no single drug ever in the whole world has actually had success in showing statistical significance in UPDRS2. So why should we? Well, number one, our drug makes people feel better. I can't tell you it's an antidepressant and anxiolytic, but we published, and it's in the news, and it's actually published, that in mice, it improves depression, it improves fear, it improves anxiety. Maybe that's why people like it. So maybe it works.
Our next question that's come in, how much do you anticipate the full phase 3 trials for AD and PD to cost? And do you have cash on hand to cover this, or will dilution be required?
Well, let me start at the bottom. Dilution will definitely be required, okay? No, we don't have cash on hand. We have enough cash right now. And in fact, we have an ELOC, and it has really been good to us because we have enough cash to prepare everything for the phase 3. So we are making 16 kilos of buntanetap. We finished the bridge studies. I just told you, we have a meeting with the FDA to discuss them. We have to do a food effect study, and we'll wait for the FDA to do it with the correct drug. All that costs money, okay? But we make 16 kilos of drug. That's going to be enough for the 2 phase 3s, whether they're short or long. So we have enough money for that. We do not have enough money for the phase 3s. We plan to raise that money when the FDA gives us the go-ahead.
Great. Okay. Our next question is, do you have a sense of the study design for each indication, such as size, duration, endpoint?
Yes, we actually, we are preparing to send all this to the FDA, so we have a pretty good understanding. Plus, we have 2 KOL groups that help us with designing the studies. So let's start with Alzheimer's. We will do an 18-month study, and we will ask the FDA if we can open the blind, not so we see it, but so that statisticians see it, to analyze the data for symptomatic. Because then we have 3 months, we have 1 month, we have 3 months, we'll have 6 months. Where is it at 6 months? And then we'll have 8, 12, and 18 months. So we want to see symptomatic at 6 months. We want it to still be above background, above baseline. That study, again, will ask the FDA if we can just use ADS-COG. If we can just use ADS-COG and don't need CDR sum of boxes or ADL or CGIC, we can actually use a lot less patients. Otherwise, we were looking at 600 to 700 patients, 2 groups. That's for Alzheimer's. For Parkinson's, it's pretty much exactly the same. We also want to open the blind at 6 to see if we have symptomatic, and then continue to 18 to see if we have disease modification. We don't know the dose yet in Parkinson's. In Alzheimer's, it's 30 mg.
Okay, so I have a question. Our prior question has come up. So related to your overall late stage development and then commercialization strategy, if all goes well with the outcome of the studies, what is your strategy? Are you looking to do it on your own? Are you looking to identify a partner? How are you going to proceed with that?
So one of the interesting things is that pharma keeps staring at us and doesn't move. Okay, and the reason is, now for Alzheimer's, we have great data, but it's a subgroup analysis. So now they're waiting for the FDA. We have a lot of pharma companies that are waiting for the FDA. We have investors, we have royalty people, they're all waiting for the FDA. So it seems like they keep waiting for better and better and better data. Now, in terms of commercialization, we are 12 people right now, okay? We have a bunch of consultants on top of those 12 people. We have KOLs. We are okay to do clinical studies. Would we be okay to commercialize a drug for $100 billion? No way. We would have to staff up so much. And as you know, when you hire 300 people a day, not patients, 300 people a day, it usually doesn't work because you just make a jumble, you just dump everybody together. So I think pharma will do a much, much better job marketing and selling, but we will definitely do the development because so far we have done a great job with development. With 90 million, we got to this point, which is really amazing.
Right. And then just a follow-up question from me. If anyone else has a question, you click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. My follow-up question is, you talked about the key opinion leaders that you have working alongside you, and I'm just referring now to what's the data that's been in the public domain. What are their thoughts? I mean, because they're both areas that are so challenging and in desperate need of real treatment options. So what are the key opinion leaders saying about your public data?
There are two types, the young ones and the established ones. The young ones love it. Those are on our key opinion leader panels. The old ones, and I shouldn't say the old, well, they're old, but yes, the established ones, they side with pharma. They wait until the data is perfect. And that's a little disappointing because you would think that, they're intelligent people, but they don't want to jeopardize their consulting agreements. And so they wait for pharma.
Okay. Our next question, we had another come in. Any NIH grants for Alzheimer's?
Interesting question. Thanks for asking that. So I tried five times to get the phase 2, which is an ADPD study, which actually the data was good, to get that sponsored for, because it was 6, 7, 8 million. That's kind of totally within the budget of the NIH. And they turned me down 5 times because they didn't believe that the same drug could work in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So when the Alzheimer data came out, we organized a call with the National Institute of Aging. And the lady said, I think you need to confirm the data. Best data I ever saw. She definitely changed her mind. So she said we should apply for a grant. The preliminary application is in August. The final application is October. And the money will be, I'm not sure when the money comes because the government has a tendency of shutting down and having no budget. But it will be assigned in January and February. So that was very encouraging because finally the NIA has changed its mind.
Right. It looks like we have time for one more question. Is there any avenue for compassionate use or similar designation for people who were in phase 2 trials to continue drug usage from now until the end of this year?
Not compassionate use. There are 2 problems with compassionate use. Number one, the lawyers don't like it. They told me very, very clearly, well, somebody dies because in a car accident, it was your fault. So don't give compassionate use. The second one is the FDA is very skimpy on compassionate use if it's not life-threatening. And unfortunately, while Alzheimer's and Parkinson's are devastating and eventually kill a person, short-term, they do not. So that's one side. The other side, though, we will open an open label study. And everybody who has been on our drug ever can start the open label study. We think it's going to be first quarter of next year.
Right. And then just one quick follow-up to the NIH. How much would that be in grants for the phase 3 AD trial?
40 million. We already discussed that.
Okay. Got it. Okay. All right, so that does conclude the Q&A from our audience, but I have one more question. Maria, you and your team are doing great work in such important areas of unmet need. It's been an exciting time for the company with data and now data upcoming. Before we close, I'd love to hear from your thoughts why you think investors should consider being an investor in Annovis right now.
Because the stock is really cheap. We have, or maybe it's me, I take all the blame. I have had zero credibility. Okay, I shouldn't be so blunt, but it's true. We have a drug that does everything no other drug in the world does. And people are very skeptical. Now, every time we have data, the data has reinforced what I believe. Lately, the early Alzheimer data really reinforces, but it doesn't work in advance. So it's a subgroup analysis and so on. But in my opinion, I'm 900% sure the drug works. Yes, I will do all the studies in the world to confirm it to the world and prove it to the world. The drug works. We have not had one study in humans or in animals where the drug didn't work. So we're dirt cheap. Sooner or later, somebody's going to figure that one out.
Wonderful. Well, this does conclude the Annovis Bio quick pitch. I'd like to thank Dr. Maria Maccecchini, founder, president, and CEO of Annovis Bio for joining us today. I'd also like to thank our audience for your time, attention, and great questions, and look forward to you joining us today at 3 p.m. Eastern for our next presentation. Be sure to stay up to date on Annovis Bio by signing up for email alerts on their website at annovisbio.com and follow along on their social channels. And as a reminder, you can access the full schedule of our event on virtualinvestorco.com. Maria, thank you so much. To our audience, thank you, and hope to see everyone back at 3.
Thank you very much, Janine. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.